So let's start here with Jakob. Jakob, can you share some of the innovative technologies, for example, that Spowdi is using? Because apart from your, you being a sort of a brand ambassador for Sweden on sustainability earlier on, you now look after the board, or you are part of the board at a green tech company called Spowdi, also my colleague in that. Yep. How is Spowdi solving for food production, creating a more resilient food production through technology?
Well, thank you, Rupali, and thank you very much to everybody, Ambassador, and everybody behind this initiative. I think you all understand that India is the continent, the country where Sweden is really focusing its attention. Before doing this sustainable business, I was number 2 in Beijing, in China, in 2010. And well, that has waned off a little bit to many reasons. We don't have to go into that, but you get that same type of buzz around your country, Ambassador. But it's also in a very unequal type of development, as we saw in China, where the cities are leading, and you wonder what will happen with the countryside, and what will happen with these millions of people living off their land, or trying to live off their land. So a year ago, I was asked to join the board of Spowdi, and Spowdi is I would say it's more like a scale-up now, but there's an innovation behind it. It's a small solar panel that you carry in one hand. It goes and feeds energy to a power unit, and in that unit there's a compressor that gives air to a pump that you put in water, and that water is then filtered through drip lines. And that will create remarkable results, as we have seen in India. We have worked through an organization called SEVA, Self-Employed Women Association, because we are a small startup in the northern part of Sweden. We cannot be the last mile distributor. But through SEVA, we have this organization and some collaboration with some local banks. We have been able to bring that technology to mainly women farmers. And the results have been phenomenal. Triple their income, triple their yield, 80% water reduction compared to flood irrigation. And from a diplomat's point of view, we have to think about how we feed the planet. And 1/3 of the food is produced by small-scale farmers, where the productivity is the lowest. So we just feel there's a super opportunity for everybody to grow. And outside India, you see the same thing in Central America. Migration pressure because of climate change. Where do they go? They go to the US. Do the US want these refugees? No. They want them to stay. So we try to find ways where people can live off their land, not just from day to day, but also become entrepreneurs. So that's a little bit the perspective. Well, I get excited about this. You know this. Sorry.
We all do. We have very long debates and discussions when we meet in office. But talking about from agriculture, that's debatable again. And talking about, well, food production, let's move on to blue foods as well. What does Blått Centrum do, and how does it look at sustainable food systems as part of what you do?
So blue food is Swedish collaboration to look at how we can change a little bit what we eat, but also change the attitude of people. So going from more of the meat, maybe to use everything from algae to fish and use the whole fish. And the Blue Center is this collaboration between Uppsala University, the County Administration Board, and the region of Gotland. And the strength of that is that we have all these government together, and we can sit and talk about challenges, which is one is the food, and water is of course another one. So, but I think for the blue food is something that engages a lot of people and should engage a lot of people, because we need to change a little bit what we eat. And I think India, you are better than Sweden in that respect. Sweden has a long tradition of being meat eaters and not using the resources in the water as well. So I think that's the place where we have a lot to learn from each other, yes.
And interestingly, you all also work in the energy space as far as, so you do have some collaborations, I think, with for looking at wind energy and other clean energy initiatives?
Yes, we do. And I think for us at the Blue Center, that is mostly engaging in how we can use wind, offshore wind, in a multidisciplinary way. Because I think the water is going to be a resource that's going to be limited. And if we need the wind power, but we also need the area. So if we can use it for other sources like algae or mussel or helping the fish or whatever it can be, I think we have to think in that way. So it cannot just be the different activities. So I think that is something that is really, really important for the future, yes.
And I'll come to you, Swami. So Jakob and Gunilla spoke about, thank you. Jakob and Gunilla spoke about food production and how innovation can kind of solve for some of the challenges in food production. And also, one of the key challenges is also about energy, right? How much energy goes into producing what we produce. And that's why we also have Tor and Per here who are going to reflect on the energy bit. But how do you, and since you do put together academia, industry, as well as policy thoughts together, how would you connect food production, energy, and how we can sort of make it easier, cleaner, more efficient, as well as better for our planet?
Thanks, Rupali. I think it's an interesting question, and as usual, I'm left with the most difficult question to answer. So, no, I think there are a couple of ways in which this could be looked at, and I think there are a few examples in India that are taking place. One is an example of a foundation which is trying to go ahead and start with a concept saying that water is the new carbon. So when you start looking at water as the new carbon, then you're going ahead and looking at water as something that needs to be quantified in a manner that everyone understands it in the same way and has a direct application to different use cases and business cases. And of course, this has both geopolitical and geoeconomic implications because there are certain countries which are importing a lot of food, fruits, vegetables, etc. And by default, it's embedded water. So how do you sort of go ahead and account for that kind of a water? So the moment you start looking at water as new carbon, that's one kind of a framework where you're able to go ahead and start having collaborations, cooperations, conversations, communication that brings in a certain quantifiable way of doing this. That's one. The second is to go ahead and try and do things which is at a L2 or an L3 level, which is more in terms of eco-efficiency, use lesser energy, lesser amounts of water. I think Mehra gave this great example of that potato farming example where it's 7 liters turns to 1 liter. I think Spowdi is doing a great job with going ahead and looking at solar irrigation pumps. But those would be what would be called as process efficiencies or output efficiencies. So you need to have conversations that happens at both levels. One at the level of actions which are very specific and direct and can be measured. And second would be to go ahead and look at water as an commodity that has the same quantifiability as energy or as carbon for that matter.
Well, that's really interesting, Swami, and perhaps we'll touch upon that with Jakob in a bit, but I want to bring in Tor as well as Per here. So you spoke about energy efficiencies and also you spoke about the input, right? So the energy input. You've been doing some fascinating research as far as energy efficiency in buildings and especially historical buildings, which is sort of legacy that has been created. Now, how do you retrofit in many ways and make buildings which are already in existence more energy efficient? And I think there's some examples here at Uppsala campus, Gotland itself, that you worked on.
I'll try to answer your question or elaborate on the theme using 2 case studies on the island of Gotland. We have 92 medieval churches on the Gotland countryside on an island with 60,000 people. So is that an asset or a burden? Well, a little bit of both. But they're about 800 years old, and we have a responsibility to the future generations to preserve them, at least aiming for another 800 years. And now we're facing climate change. And these churches are not used extensively. Swedish people are not very religious these days. So the main challenge is to stop them from decaying. And the main threats are biohazards. It's mold, it's fungi, and wood-boring insects. And as climate change is coming, we can expect these problems to get worse. So the question is how to deal with that in a resource-efficient way. If energy was unlimited, we could easily solve it by heating and dehumidification, but we need passive, low-tech methods to do that. The second case study that I would like to bring in is the World Heritage Town of Visby. And here we're talking about mitigation of climate change, reducing the CO2 footprint of the built heritage in Visby. And technical solutions are necessary but not sufficient. And much of our research has been focusing on facilitating informed decisions, aiming to come up with proper solutions for each building or each type of building, rather than telling people what to do in detail beforehand. So this is an outline of our research, and possibly I can come back to talk more about what we've actually done.
Sure, you can touch upon what you've actually done. That's fine. We'd like to hear about it. So.
Yes. So going back to the churches, I'd like to, as an example, mention one project that has developed over the years in a sort of a tripod of cooperation between the researchers of Uppsala University, the church organization, and the local tech company. So I mentioned the threat of climate change and biohazards. And now we're monitoring the indoor climate in all 92, or almost all 92 churches continuously. And data is available in an app. So rather than finding out that we had mold growth and what to do about it, there's an alarm going on. There will be an alarm in the phone, so you can do something to prevent these damages. And of course, that's both in economic terms and in terms of saving the cultural heritage, that's the most important thing. But it's also allows us to involve the local church organization in the management of churches rather than doing it top down. Right. And as for Visby, and now we're changing the scale completely. We've been part of developing European guidelines for improving energy performance in historic buildings. So this is a process that would facilitate an informed decision for each building, bringing us a number of appropriate solutions that would be suitable for that particular building, rather than having broad instructions of what to do and what not to do.
Well, that's interesting because we know that at Campus Gotland we can see on a big screen as soon as we enter the main building that how much of there are solar panels, and we can see how much energy is not being consumed as yet, but how much energy is being generated by the solar panels. So the way data is being captured, especially on clean energy, is interesting. Per, bringing you in, a lot of the way we utilize cleaner energy compared to sort of fossil fuels, for example, it also has to do with consumer behavior, and it also has to do with what we learn, what we unlearn, and in our daily lives. Gröna Mobilister, I believe, also helps with that. Could you take us through how you go about that and what the what the results have been? Any example that you can share?
Yeah, thank you, Rupali. So, as you said, I work for Gröna Mobilister, in English, the Green Mobilists or the Green Motorists, and we are a consumer organization. And we also try to make it easy for consumers, for citizens to make sustainable choices, and in so doing we promote sustainable policies, and in particular we try to promote policies involving transparency in industry, and also to promote the dissemination of this information, data from the industry, in the form of consumer information, eco-labels, health warnings, and so on point of sale of fossil fuel, renewable fuel, and other products and services in the transportation sector. And as examples of what we have done, we have helped introducing here in Sweden eco-labels on most gas stations, fuel pumps, and also some charging stations. And we have also nudged the current Swedish government to propose eco-labels on all new cars, involving not only the driving phase, but also the production phase, taking into account extraction of minerals and so on, and the emission they generate. And to speak about scalability, I think this idea, or if you may say innovation, is so simple that it's very easy to scale, and it can be adopted anywhere in the world if you take into account cultural differences and, of course, differences when it comes to availability of relevant data. And realizing the scalability across the world, we collaborate with people in many different countries. And so far there are warning labels on all gas pumps in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which of course is known as a very progressive university town. And they may soon be up, the warning labels on all gas pumps in the state of Hawaii. And we have also seen interest from lots of other countries, South Africa, China, South Korea, and so on, but nothing's still happening much. And sorry for taking so much time, but finally I must say that, as you have probably already been thinking in the audience, that this idea is very simple to the health information and warning labels on cigarette packs, which have had some significant influence in making smoking less normal, or rather abnormal.
So, very interesting points on sort of various different aspects which are being looked at for cleaner energy in production of different we're looking at different sectors in that sense. But to come to the point of scale, which you touched upon, Per, I'll put that to you first, Swami. There are challenges when one moves from prototyping to project to, say, the initial phase 1, to then scaling. And perhaps I can go to you after that, Jakob, because you have an interesting example to share. Now, how does one overcome those challenges, or how does one accelerate from market, like innovation, to actually reach the endpoint where it can be usable?
So probably I'll start off with a absolutely out-of-the-box kind of an example. I'm not sure how many people in this room, I'm sure the Indians would know, but many who are not from India may not know, but the world's first completely 100% certified organic state was Sikkim, which was certified in 2016. So it's everything that is grown in Sikkim. State, it's like, state would be a region here, is completely 100% certified organic, and it's the world's first. So everything from tomatoes to carrots to onions is 100% organic. So the state doesn't use any chemicals, doesn't import any chemical fertilizers, does not allow for that, and does not spray anything chemical. So if one is looking at scale from the perspective of, is it scalable? Is sustainability or climate action or sustainable solutions scalable? There are several models available, it's just that we need to sort of expand the scope of how we are looking and sort of bring in other examples from geographies which typically don't get that focus, so to speak. So that's possible. The second is also to go ahead and look at how do you scale. So that one is what is scale, and the second is how do you scale. So what is scale is either you can, so I think we had a very interesting conversation during Fika conversation where I think one of the students asked a question about solar panels. So it's not the technology itself, but how the technology is being mobilized in order to go ahead and produce a certain efficient output that is acceptable to business and market. So you can have solar panels that could be used as large solar farms, but you can also use the same solar panels on rooftop and have local energy networks. So scale doesn't necessarily mean size. So you can have scale that is networked. Okay. So you can have micro units that network with each other, and you can have different kinds of local energy networks, for instance. So scale and size are two separate things. So I'll probably stop here. Because then I can keep going on and on.
All right.
And
so
I'll leave it at that.
how does one sort of scale, either through a network effect or through sort of going to, scaling in terms of size? Any challenges that you'd like to highlight and how one can overcome that? Jakob.
Well, I've been giving this quite some thought. You know, we have 500 million small-scale farms out there in the world, and around every farm you can imagine there's a father, mother, and brothers and sisters and all that. And I'm just thinking a lot. I mean, how do we have 2.5 billion people living off small-scale farms, something like that? And you come from a country like Sweden with 10 million, and you start to think that we have an innovation that could target at least 200 million of these people. So what I've started to do is a little bit trying to calculate how much water will be saved per farm if you utilize one system. And what would happen if you multiply that and have a factor of 10 up to, you know, maybe 30,000? Because if you don't take the big numbers in your mouth, you start to end up with pilots. Let's do a pilot project and we measure. And then somewhere there down the line, policymakers get a little bit lost. So I've started the other way around. If we want to collaborate with Spowdi, can you take a project of 30,000? Not now, but at least this is ours. With 30,000, we can save 7 days of water running through the Niagara Falls, fresh water, or 60,000 trucks going back and forth to Los Angeles and New York. Add a zero to that. So I think you have to start to be a little bit more courageous in your mindset. And that's why these guys, Musk and Gates and they don't feel that limit, but policymakers do, and they find all the reasons why we can't do this. So that's one thing. And the second thing is, I think, finance. The money is there. The farmer is here. And in between those two, there's an ocean of obstructions. Middle managers, midmen, like myself, I guess, in my old day. So here's also something, but it's happening now. And I think India could really be one of those places, because now you can utilize IT. Every farmer has some type of smart farm app. Apply for a loan, credit, buff, there you go. So we're quite optimistic, but also frustrated, I guess, impatient.
Well, thanks for that, Jakob. So you spoke about sort of the gap that exists really to scale, right? I'm being shown a placard which says 1 minute. That was 2 minutes ago. So I'll take just very, very quick answers. Per, coming to you, network effect, how does it work? Very, very quickly, because that's something which Green Mobilister works on.
Network effects are very important, because the most important part, as you said, Jakob, is getting the politicians to realize that this is simple to implement. If they just decide to do it. So my experience, if you build a network of collaborators, partners, gradually, it very quickly will yield results if you're determined.
How about you, in terms of sort of network effect, to kind of, you work on with other partners on a common goal. So how does the network effect work for Blått Centrum?
I think it works well, and I think one of the reasons is that we are on an island and we have a very tight connection, and it's close, and we can talk to each other. And I think that is really important, exactly what you were saying too, that we need to collaborate and we need to show that there's a win-win situation, which this is. And I think that is one of the most important things. And it doesn't need to be very big, as you said from the beginning. And I think we very often talk that everything should be big. We should scale up, but we don't need to. We can also collaborate and do it in a smaller scale.
Well, very interesting perspectives. Thanks, Gunilla. And final word to Tor. So with the innovation and with the research, rather, that you all have been working on, can that be shared across, beyond sort of borders? And how does one take all this research and then perhaps translate it somewhere else or try it somewhere else with a collaboration?
Thank you. I was hoping for that question. We have already transformed our research on urban energy modeling in a historic context to Egypt with a completely different set of techniques and materials, and also where the challenge is cooling rather than heating, and it works fine. And I see no reason why we couldn't, bring our methods to India. And when it comes, I mentioned the churches on Gotland, and I know that India has a very strong tradition when it comes to traditional materials and techniques. You know, lime is a very important material on Gotland. The best book on the use of lime in historic buildings is written by an Indian. So I see many opportunities to have an exchange of methods and approaches, even if the solutions in the end are not exactly the same. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Swami, Tor, Jakob, Gunilla, and Per for your time.